Thank you very much, Steve, for the introduction. Thank you to the Academy and the organising committee for inviting me to speak today. Just like Chris, I didn't know what a clinician-scientist was either. So, and then when invited to submit a title for this talk is what am I going to call it? So I put my at the beginning. So my life as a clinician-scientist, but in fact it's really about my journey as a haematologist and how I've arrived at where I am today. My career today is 50% academic research, 30% diagnostic haematology and 20% teaching. It is a full life, it's a rewarding life, it's exciting, it's addictive, and it's hard to stop. So how did I get here? And I'd say along the way I've been really honoured to become a Fellow of the Academy and to be able to contribute to the work of the Academy, most recently through being a member of the external steering group for the research roadmap for blood cancers, a 10-year plan, knowing that in a decade blood cancers will be the most common type of cancer in this country. So what are clinician scientists? And as I said, Chris and I both said, look, it's a term we weren't really familiar with. But clinician scientists, first written about in 1979, an endangered species in the New England Journal. And in 2019, another paper also in the New England Journal saying an endangered species, saving the endangered physician scientist, a plan for accelerating medical breakthroughs. So what are clinician scientists? According to these two publications, they, are a driving force in biomedical research. Utilising the medical knowledge that we've acquired through our medical studies, we have an understanding of disease, of pathogenesis, we know where the gaps are. And through understanding the gaps, clinician scientists develop technologies and therapies, and 1/3 of Nobel Prizes in physiology or medicine are people who have a clinical background and then undertaken scientific research and discovery. The combination of research and patient care is achievable. But the pathway, again, as Chris has said, is not one that's really mapped out. It is unclear. And our two Nobel laureates, Emeritus Professor Barry Marshall and the late Robin Warren, whose office and desk was only about 10 metres from mine when I first came to Perth, they did not go down a traditional pathway by any means. Yet they were clinicians, they were scientists, and they made a critical discovery which has changed the lives of millions of people. I could have retitled my talk for today about my journey, how did I arrive to where I am today, which started in Sydney, where I undertook my initial period of study, which then gained traction and took me down the scientific route in Oxford, so in the top right. And then a major change in my career some years later when I went to Cambridge, which Steve just mentioned, and that I think was really pivotal in changing my direction from being a working haematologist to really having an academic bent and a scientific basis and research arm to my career, and then coming to UWA. And I'm going to take you on that journey, that travelogue. So I started at the University of Sydney, where I studied medicine, and I was interested in medical science. And during that time as a medical student, I volunteered as a research subject. There was no ethics, no governance. I didn't sign anything. I just turned up. And I worked with a neurologist who was doing some experimentation on muscles and synapses, and I was one of the guinea pigs. And I found it really interesting. I was not cited as a subject in any publication, but I at least understood a little bit about clinical research, having been on the other side of the desk. Halfway through my medical studies, I was approached by the Professor of Physiology and invited to take a year out from my medical degree to do a Bachelor of Biomedical Science. and I made the wrong decision. I said no. I was keen to finish medicine. I didn't want to take a break, leave my cohort, my classmates, and spend a year doing research. I wanted to continue on and finish my degree. And that is one regret that I have. I don't know if it would have changed my life had I taken that year out, but in retrospect, I think it would have been really valuable early in my medical studies to have even better understanding about the scientific process. But I kept going because I wanted to be a surgeon. As you know, I am not a surgeon, but that was my sort of very basic thinking at the time about what I wanted to do when I completed my medical degree. My medical degree was 5 years in length, similar to the Curtin program here in Western Australia. It was straight from school, and I didn't have a gap year. I went straight in and did my five years of medicine, and I was kept sane by playing hockey. And by playing hockey, I don't look like a sports person, but I had great reflexes. I was quick off the mark. I could sprint, but I had no endurance, at least in sport. And I played hockey for the university, and I was awarded a University Blue. And that, in fact, was instrumental in the rest of my career. I'll come back to that. So that is the University of Sydney, and I'm a member of the Blues and Gold Society of the university. I looked at this board many times over the course of my studies, and that's where exam results were posted at the time. There was no anonymity. Everybody knew how everyone else had done, and I looked up my results on that board in the quad of Sydney University. Here's the great quadrangle. And not only were results posted on the board, but they're also published in the newspaper. So really very public. Anyway, I graduated. Fortunately, my name was always on the list. If your name was not on the list, you really did worry. I graduated as a resident medical officer, and I worked for a couple of years as an intern and a resident, and then I changed my mind. I changed my mind because it was suggested that I apply for a scholarship to Oxford, which I was successful in receiving. And that scholarship was based on having had my name on that board. I'd passed and done reasonably well in my studies. But the Blue from Sydney University added to my curriculum vitae. And so having academic ability and having some sporting prowess in inverted commas. As I said, I don't look like a sports person, but having the Blue really helped me, and I got a scholarship to Oxford, and off I went at the end of my second year. So I hadn't completed a full 2 years of general medical work, and off I went to Oxford to commence my doctorate. This is not a standard pathway at all. This was Wendy's route, Wendy's journey, and I have no regrets about taking it. At the time, I did wonder if it was the right path to follow. All my classmates, my cohort, were continuing down the path of going to registrar training, getting to the physician or the surgical training program, and I had stopped. Because I went away and I did my doctorate, and it was full-time study. I was not doing any clinical work at all for 4 years. It was a remarkable opportunity, and the picture on the right is of a much younger Wendy. My supervisor, who was the most published haematologist scientist in the United Kingdom at the time. I didn't know that when I accepted his invitation to do my doctorate with him. And the sabbatical period by the late Professor Ronald Hoffman, who was one of the greatest haematopathologists, who came to the lab where I was working. And this was just a great opportunity to work with some of the best in the world. I was doing lab work. It was a lab doctorate, a DPhil or an Oxford PhD. I had no idea how to hold a test tube or a pipette or how to do anything. And my lab scientist colleagues, pictured here on the left, wondered what on earth this young doctor is doing in their laboratory. But this turned into great teamwork, that I understood the clinical problem, They understood the scientific method and experimentation, and we learnt together. We learnt from each other. And it is about, what I've mentioned here is about teamwork, collaboration, and I'm going to use the word mentorship, but I didn't regard David, the late David Mason, as a mentor. He was my supervisor. He was my guiding light. But the word mentor wasn't, in fact, used in those days. And this is where I lived. It wasn't all my home, but I did live in the University College, St John's College in Oxford. And this period of 4 years was really instrumental in guiding the next phase of my career. I, in fact, didn't want to leave Oxford. I didn't want to leave science, but I made the decision that I really should. I had learnt a lot from the doctorate. I'd learnt about medical research. The picture on the top right is a method that I invented together with David, which was helpful in diagnosing leukemias, subclassifying them, and determining which type of therapy was required. This was a brand new method. I was the first in the world to know how to do this. The first in the world. Now, how exciting is that? Nobody else knew how to do this. And that method, never patented, because patents weren't a thing, just like ethics and governance weren't a thing, but this methodology was adopted by around 30 countries in the world and still continues to be used. And this was 40 years ago. I was dedicated to this topic, and that's what a doctorate is about. Whether you do it full-time or part-time, it is absolute devotion to that period of study and the work that you are undertaking together with your supervisor and your team and discovering something new. But I had to maintain my sanity, and I did by continuing to play hockey. And, well, you may be able to recognise which one of me is in that picture. I had reflexes and I was quick off the mark. And as I said, this was addictive. I didn't want to stop, but I had to make a decision about my career. And the opportunity came up when invited to apply for a registrar training position in haematology back in Sydney. And my hand and the pen wrote the letter. My heart and my brain were not in it, but I just knew I had to do it. So I went back to Sydney. People have said, but aren't you going to do a postdoc? And I said, what's that? I did not know what a postdoc was. I didn't really have a mentor. David had supervised me through my science, but he didn't really guide me in any way about the next stage of my career. So it was really very much a personal decision. So I returned to Australia and I felt my interest now is not surgery, it's very much haematology, it's leukemia, it's diagnostics, and it is translational. But to be able to continue in that career, I had to then do the vocational training, which I did through the College of Pathologists of Australasia. And interesting, today in this room, we have microbiology and haematology, both branches of pathology. And I struggled to an extent. I passed the exams of the college, but I really wanted to continue with the research. As I said, when I was doing the research, I totally stopped doing clinical work, but when I was now doing diagnostic haematology training, I didn't want to stop doing the research because it was just so exciting and I want to keep doing it. And my haematology supervisor encouraged me to do it, but it was just time was an issue and I did not have the time, so I really had to put research on the back burner and continued down the clinical path. And from gaining a fellowship at the college, I then got a consultant position. I took an opportunity and moved to Perth from Sydney and worked in Royal Perth Hospital. And then I commenced in leadership as the clinical director of haematology in what was Path Centre. But I really felt that I was going too much down the leadership path and just diagnostics, and I still yearned for research. And so after 14 years, I had a career change. I was approached about going to Cambridge on a sabbatical for a year, and I did that. But 1 year turned into 7. It turned into selling the house and the car, and saying goodbye to my mother and my mother-in-law. My husband and I packed our bags and went to Cambridge. And that was life-changing. I took another opportunity. This was not planned in any way, but it was an opportunity to go and work again with some of the best in the world in diagnostic and cutting-edge haematology. And I then had a real opportunity in my diagnostic space. So now I was around 70% diagnostic and 30% research. So it did give me some research time. And I subspecialised in haematological malignancies, which had been my passion from some years earlier when I was in Oxford. I had a blue from Oxford, a dark blue. I didn't have a light blue from Cambridge, and I didn't play hockey in Cambridge. My legs had really given up on me. But I was now able to really integrate research with diagnostic haematology and clinical practice. And I was in the research team that discovered the new mutation that established the cause of myeloproliferative neoplasms. I was approached by Cambridge University Press and Elsevier to write a couple of books, and that was really a totally new, if I can use the word, chapter in my life. I became an associate lecturer at the University of Cambridge, and this really was a new beginning for me, not as a clinician-scientist, but what I saw as an academic haematologist, my entree to academia. But I was still working. I was employed by the National Health Service, and that posed other challenges. And when I felt that the NHS was not going to be able to support me and my ambitions, and I was approached by the University of Western Australia, returned to Perth. And my career, as I said, initially was in leadership and research and clinical diagnostics, and now I'm really focused not on any leadership at all. I'm leaving that for others, but research, diagnostics and teaching the next generation. The research, I'm no longer in the lab, where initially back in Oxford, what are you doing here in this lab? You've got green fingers, you don't know how to do anything. I've learnt, and now they're saying we don't want you in the lab because methods have changed. You go and write grants, you write the research papers, you mentor the next generation and supervise, engage with industry, engage with the community, and that is what I am doing. And the problem I now have is how to keep it all within a working week. But somehow I have managed, and I have invented a new method since being here in Perth, which is shown diagrammatically there, shooting laser beams at cells and looking at molecules on the outside of the cell, at the same time being able to identify chromosomes and chromosomal abnormalities within them. And very excited to be recognised in Australia by winning the Eureka Prize for this back in 2018. And this work has been patented, and I'll leave it for you to read the patent certificate on the right. So the patent has been accepted there in Japan, but also in Australia. This may not, in fact, lead to any money for the university, but it's very exciting to know that this, again, was a world first, and that it is work that we have done here in Perth at UWA together with my team. My team, I have supervised 15 PhDs to completion. I've supervised master's students, honours students and haematology fellows. And I get great joy from seeing the next generation learn and grow and establish their own careers. And at the bottom there are 3 PhDs, different generations whom I've supervised through their own studies. All of this has been built on what I did back in the 1980s when I took that opportunity to go to Oxford, built on the back of my sporting career. The career has been fun. It's been exciting, rewarding, and I feel I really have contributed to the health and welfare of society, as well as society in general, through growing the careers of others. This is the most challenging part, is what advice can I give to you? And I've put a whole lot of words on this slide, and I've sort of reflected on what I've said. My journey was not planned. I wanted to be a surgeon, and I am not. And I have no regrets about that. My only regret was not doing a BMed Sci and doing a year of research earlier. Yes, I did take a risk by moving away from clinical medicine when all my colleagues were going on and advancing their clinical careers, and I had stopped. My income had stopped. And even today, I receive 30% less than a consultant haematologist, my colleagues, because I have taken an academic position as well as a clinical position. So my remuneration is less. I probably would have earned more had I been a plumber, but I wouldn't have found that exciting nor rewarding. I have made career decisions through the opportunities that have come my way, and it was not about finance, it was about me and doing what I wanted to do. I did my doctorate early. Chris did his a little later. I did mine full-time, he did his part-time, and I'd like to think, well, his career has been a success. I hope you think mine has as well. It doesn't matter which way you did it. And in fact, Robbie Warren and Barry Marshall didn't do doctorates at all, but still had incredible success for the world. Choose your supervisor. I think if you are doing a doctorate, choose your supervisor. I chose my supervisor ahead of the project. I met David Mason and I liked him. And I thought I could learn from him. He would take me along that journey. I did not go to him and say, this is what I want to do. I needed supervision. I needed guidance. I chose my supervisor. And that's the advice I always give to people who want to do research. Funding for research. I was very fortunate and I got a scholarship that paid my university fees and my college fees at St John's College and paid me a stipend. It was not a salary and I didn't do any other work to enable me to support myself. I lived on virtually nothing. But I survived and I had a great 4-year period which has led me down this career path. There are different ways of doing things, and I know today is different and things are much more expensive than they were then. But my most important point is get advice from others, and I know that's why you're here today. As Chris said, there is money out there for research, and it may not be NH&MRC, it may not be MRFF, there are many other sources, and I'm always amazed at how many sources of funds there are available. You have to just look for them and then give it a shot. And you will get knockbacks. And as I say to my team, if we do get a knockback, be disappointed for 24 hours and move on. We will all get knockbacks. Our papers are not accepted, our grants are not accepted, but we still succeed, we move forward. We do have to think about ourselves as people, the work-life balance, again, a term that wasn't around when I was going through my early stages of my career. But we do need to think about ourselves, our family, the people who are important to us. You will think about job security. I've changed my job many times. In fact, I get 7-year itches and I move on. I don't think I'll get another itch because I'm addicted to what I do. Finally, there's no right or wrong path to follow. This is the path at the bottom with the black swans and the cygnets behind. Do you think there is a right path to follow? No, there isn't. You can follow any path you wish. And don't worry what others might be thinking about you. Be yourself. It looks as though it's smooth sailing on top, but you may be paddling like hell underneath. Just keep going the direction you want to go. And my final word is, be yourself. Not somebody else. Be what you want to be. You may not in fact know what it is. I wanted to be a surgeon. But now, many years later, after all the opportunities that I have had, the decisions I have made, I'm happy where I've landed, and you will too. Thank you.
Can you tell people the distinction and the importance and the difference between supervision and mentoring?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Supervision to me is somebody who is guiding you through, for me, the research process. I saw my supervisor every day. That may be a little unusual, But I knew that I was being guided through the work that I was doing. My supervisor wanted to know what I had done, but more importantly, what I had found and what might be the next experiment. A mentor, as Chris had mentioned, may be somebody who is outside your own field and is almost looking at you from above, helicoptering over you and seeing what you are doing, how you're progressing, and how they may be able to guide you on what the next step may be. They may be able to identify the problems that you have faced, because you don't get everything right, the problems you have faced, how you may be able to deal with them, and then what you may consider as the next step. So one I see as more day-to-day, and the other is more slightly at a distance and seeing you as an holistic person.
Can you give some impression of the importance of teams that bring together disparate skills, which seems to be a recurring theme in your career?
Teamwork is really important, and I might go from disparate to be complementary, and that's with an E, not an I. I work in a team which has scientists who have expertise in instrumentation and flow cytometry, expertise in molecular genetics, DNA and RNA testing, expertise in bioinformatics, and I also have junior clinical colleagues who bring their own perhaps more up-to-date expertise in cutting-edge clinical aspects of haematology. We have a meeting once a week where the whole team gets together and we bring those skills together and we share them. And then I will learn from them, and one of the people whom I showed, one of the PhDs whom I supervised, I am now learning from him because the skills that he has acquired in machine learning and artificial intelligence and interpreting the data that we're generating from our experiments. So it is really bringing all the expertise together, learning from each other. And although I may be regarded as the group leader, I really do see it as a group, a team of equals sharing their skills.
Wendy, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you.